Hello, everybody, and welcome back, or welcome if you're new here to my podcast, Reading and Weeping. My name is Julia, and I am your host. And in this podcast, we talk about all things books, all things reading. So I am so excited that you are here with me today because this episode is going to be a good one. First of all, before we get into the episode, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that your holiday season was filled with lots of love and lots of relaxation. I'm so excited for what this new year is going to bring. I have set my Goodreads goal at 35 books, hoping to exceed that. But I wanted to be a little bit conservative with my goal so that I know that it's something that I can hit. Because last year, I didn't start reading until like March or April. And at that point, I had set my goal to 20 books. So I think with the extra time where I start reading on day one of the new year, I think that's a pretty attainable goal. And I'm pretty content and excited about that. So I'm just really excited for everything that I'm going to discover in the new year. And I've already started off with a fantastic book that I've been meaning to read actually for a really, really long time. And that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And in this video, I kind of wanted to do a deep dive into the Taylor Jenkins Reid universe that she has created in her books. And it's actually soon to come to the silver screen, to TV. So I'm really excited to kind of get into all of that in this episode. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. If you don't know who Taylor Jenkins Reid is, she is a very popular author, especially on the internet. And for good reason. She is a fantastic writer. If you are to take any advice from the internet at all when it comes to reading, listen to people when they recommend her books. You will not be disappointed. The ones that you will usually see being recommended are her three most popular books, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and the Six, and Malibu Rising. To me, a huge reason why these books are so popular and so intriguing is because they're all part of the same universe. Those three, and then the new one that just came out this year, Carrie Soto is Back, they're all a part of this same world. I call it the Taylor Jenkins Reid universe. Everything is so interconnected with each other, which I think is really smart. Not only from a story perspective, but also from a marketing perspective. Because when I first read Malibu Rising, I had heard a couple of other people say, yeah, those same characters are in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six. And I was like, wow, I gotta read those other books now. Which is so smart because it's not a series, but you want to read all of these individual stories to kind of see how this whole world is kind of built and kind of connects to each other, because it takes place sort of in Hollywood throughout the years. So like it starts with like Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Malibu Rising. They both kind of go back to like the 50s. And then it's like the 60s and 70s in Daisy Jones, and then the 80s in Malibu Rising, and like I think it's the 80s and the 90s, I think, with Carrie Soto is Back, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't read that one yet, but I'm excited to. But that concept just really draws you in from the get-go, and that's what makes you keep on reading and keep wanting to get these books and basically devour them. All of these books I finished in like a day because they're just that good. And maybe it's because this book is so fresh in my brain, but honestly, I think that Daisy Jones and the Six is my favorite. I never thought I would say that because Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo literally had my jaw on the floor. That book was so the plot twist in it, no one freaking talks about it, and I'm not gonna spoil it, but I just wanted to acknowledge it because no one talks about it, and it's literally like turned my world upside down. But anyway, Daisy Jones and the Six is so different from that story, even though it has like some of the similar elements. I just think that this book was a lot more reflective and complex. These characters and their relationships with each other are so well fleshed out that you can't help but read on because you want to see how their relationships evolve throughout. And this story is also very interesting because it's told from an interview format. So you have an author of a book who's basically interviewing Daisy Jones and all of the members of the Six, which is the band, and they're all telling their own sides of the story. And all of them are a little bit biased, a little bit unreliable, but you get to see the exact opposite perspective on different situations that arise throughout the story. So it's pretty cool. So I just wanted to mention that before I get into the actual synopsis. I did not read the synopsis of this book like I normally do. I actually saw the teaser trailer for the miniseries that's coming out, and that made me want to read it. So this is going to be my first time reading the synopsis, and I'm going to just basically say whether or not I think it's a good or bad representation of the book as a whole. Daisy is a girl coming of age in LA in the late 60s, sneaking into clubs on the Sunset Strip, sleeping with rock stars, and dreaming of singing at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Her voice is getting noticed, and she has the kind of heedless beauty that makes people do crazy things. Also getting noticed is the Six, a band led by the brooding Billy Dunn. On the eve of their first tour, his girlfriend, Camilla, finds out she's pregnant, and with the pressure of impending fatherhood and fame, Billy goes a little wild on the road. Daisy and Billy cross paths when a producer realizes that the key to supercharged success is to put the two together. What happens next will become the stuff of legend. The making of that legend is chronicled in this riveting novel, written as if it were the oral history of one of the biggest bands of the 70s. In Daisy Jones and the Six, Taylor Jenkins Reid brilliantly captures an unforgettable place and time in an utterly distinctive voice. So, first impressions, yeah, that's a pretty good overview of the book. I kind of wish they didn't include the detail about Camilla getting pregnant, because the beginning of the book details how Camilla and Billy met each other, and then the pregnancy kind of happens 50, maybe 60 pages in the book. I don't necessarily remember, but that is not really part of the background that you need to understand the story. It's part of the story. I mean, it happens before Daisy Jones meets the Six, but that part of the story detailing how the Six got together and how Billy met Camilla and fell in love with her is just as central to the story as Daisy Jones becoming part of the band and them making music together. Long story short, it's not background, it's central to the story. But other than that, good overview to the story. I don't know if this summary would necessarily entice me to go out and get this book on its own. I think because I've read Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Malibu Rising, and I know that this is in the same universe, and I've seen the teaser trailer for the show, that I just went out and got it without reading this. And I think that if you go out and you get it without reading the synopsis, you're going to have just as good of a time, because I sure did. Now, I'm not sure if this is because of the characters themselves, because, they were rock stars and they are kind of telling the story in a flashback from their old age and they're so wise. But the way in which they tell their story and the advice that they share and just the lessons that they learned, it's all written so beautifully. Taylor Jenkins Reid, I didn't realize she was such an incredible writer before I read this book. And the way that she talks about certain concepts of infidelity and addiction and things like that, the way that she kind of funnels that through these characters, it's so profound. I'm going to give an example of this, but it might spoil the book. I'm going to do the best that I can not to. I will say that this thing that I'm going to talk about happens pretty early in the book, but the perspective that I'm going to share with you happens really a lot later in the book. So here we go. Personally, I think that infidelity is unforgivable. Like, you cheat, you're out. To me, that's personally how I feel. I have never understood why people stay in relationships after somebody cheats on somebody. I've never understood that. Most of the examples that I'm thinking of are from pop culture, like when a famous couple stays together after somebody cheats, which is kind of ironic because in the book, they're famous people and somebody cheats on somebody else. So that's really interesting now that I'm thinking about it. But when these characters talk about why they keep it together, you know, there's all these excuses like, oh, for the kids, oh, like I still love them, whatever. When I hear the way that these characters talk about it in this book, it makes so much sense to me. It truly made me understand why people stay together after infidelity. And I'm going to read a little excerpt to you because it kind of changed my life. Loving somebody isn't perfection and good times and laughing and making love. Love is forgiveness and patience and faith, and every once in a while, it's a gut punch. That's why it's a dangerous thing when you go loving the wrong person, when you love somebody who doesn't deserve it. You have to be with someone that deserves your faith, and you have to be deserving of someone else's. It's sacred. I have no tolerance for people that waste other people's faith in them. None at all. And then the other person who is in the relationship says, if I've given the impression that trust is easy with your spouse, with your kids, with anybody you care about, if I've made that seem like it's easy to do, then I've misspoken. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but you have nothing without it, nothing meaningful at all. That's why I chose to do it, over and over and over, even when it bit me in the ass, and I will keep choosing it until the day I die. These quotes are so heavy because these two characters in this book, they go through a lot. They go through hell and back, and yet they persevere. And I think when you ask a lot of couples in real life who've been together for like 30, 40 years, and you're like, what's the secret? What's the secret to being married that long? And they're like, oh, you just got to laugh a lot, or you got to keep the spark alive, or whatever they say. I personally think this secret to a long-lasting relationship is exactly what's said in these quotes, is faith in each other. And one of these characters has no reason to trust the other. I certainly wouldn't have if I was in this person's situation. I would have up and left. But to me, talking about faith in a relationship versus trust, I think trust a lot of the time is based on actions. Whereas faith is pretty much blind. You don't really know. It's kind of intangible, faith in somebody. I mean, when I think of faith, I think of like faith in a higher power or faith in just the world in general. I don't think of faith in people. I think that is such a tall order to have faith in somebody. And I think if you don't have it, it doesn't keep you going. Like in this quote, if you don't have it, you have nothing meaningful at all. Now, I do not want to come off as sounding like cheating's okay, or that it's okay to be naive, or it's okay to tolerate somebody taking advantage of you and your time. That is not what I mean at all, because there are certain deal breakers for people in relationships, for everybody, and that might come with a past experience or a past trauma that you may have gone through. And trust that. Trust your instinct when there is something wrong. I'm not saying don't do that, but if somebody is worth it, if somebody is worth your faith, is worth your time and effort, if they are working to be the best versions of themselves, not only for you, but also for themselves, then don't give up on that person. Because it won't only take you through the terrible times, but it will be exactly what they need to get them through it, if they're worth it. And it'll make the good times all that much sweeter. And you'll see the life that maybe you two have built together and be able to look back with pride rather than shame. So that was huge. That just goes to show you what you can learn from books, because before that, I did not believe in love very much. And now I'm like, shit. When people say that like love and marriage is work and all of that, I get what they mean, but it's hard to see the bright spot in that. And I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid articulated that perfectly, especially in the context of these characters, she articulated it perfectly. And it really does just go to show you what you can learn from reading. You know, when you least expect it. I wasn't going out of my way to learn something, and yet I did. So that was a really nice, pleasant surprise in this book. And there are lots of different moments in this book that kind of deal with big things conceptually and really summing it up in a beautiful way. A great mechanism of doing that in this book, because it is a book about the 70s and about the music scene, is through music, is through songwriting. And while you don't necessarily hear the melodies in your head, obviously, because it's just written out kind of like a poem, you can see not only how these characters are truly feeling at their emotional core, but you can also see the lessons to be learned from them. Just like any great song, like put on a Taylor Swift song from any era and you will feel things and you will learn things at the same time. And this book, I feel like, does the same thing. Taylor Jenkins Reid could be a songwriter. She could. I don't know if she plays any instruments, but she could be a songwriter for sure. All of the songs, by the way, that are written on the album Aurora by Daisy Jones and the Six are in the back of the book. So all of those lyrics and all of those songs are basically poems, but they're all written in the back of the book, because you get little snippets of the lyrics throughout the book, but you don't get like the full songs. In the back of the book, you get the full songs, and they're really a great read because they kind of sum up the entire story and how all of these characters kind of felt and the journey that they all took together. It's really, really beautiful. But I've got to say, this conversation is leading me into the cinematic universe that is going to be created from these books. This literary universe that Taylor Jenkins Reid has created is now coming to the big screen and small screen. I think Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is going to be a movie, but Daisy Jones and the Six is going to be a TV series that comes out, I believe, March 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. And this is where we're going to see this entire book come to life. We're going to see these songs come to life. And like I said before, they don't have a melody to them in the book. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this show brings all of that to life and creates melodies for these songs, and like not just that, but also like the tones of them, because it is kind of explicitly stated like how much like piano is in it, or how much guitar, how much bass is in it. And if they don't interpret that correctly, I think that's a really big part of the book. I think if they don't interpret that correctly, it is going to kind of mess the show up a little bit, because music is so empathic and it's so emotional, and it is the mechanism in this book that tells you where these characters are and their journeys with themselves and with each other. And I think it's so important that they get that right in the show. I am a little bit nervous about that. What I'm not nervous about is the casting. The casting for this is pretty outstanding, if I do say so myself. I'm going to read you who is in the cast and who is playing what. The first person is Daisy Jones herself, and that is being played by Riley Keough. If you don't know who Riley Keough is, she is an actress, but she is also Elvis's granddaughter. I think just the irony of that alone, in how like Elvis's story and Daisy Jones's stories like kind of intersect. It's like the rock world and how they kind of skyrocketed to fame and all of that stuff. I think all of that is very interesting within itself. But I also think that Riley Keough is a good casting choice just because she's a good actress. She's very, very good. I've only seen her in like a couple of things, but I'm just really excited to see like where she takes the character and how her background in itself informs the character. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting take, and it's something that I am really looking forward to. In the teaser trailer, in like the 10-second teaser trailer, she looks really, really good. I'm really, really excited for it. Next up is Sam Clafen playing Billy Dunn. Now, when I read a book, I normally picture the characters as certain actors anyway. Like whenever I read any book, I'm like, who could play that person in a movie? I did not picture Sam Clafen playing this character, but now that I'm thinking about it, he does a great job with book to film adaptations. If you don't know, he played Finnick Odair in Catching Fire and Mockingjay. He was fantastic in it. I never would have thought of him to play that role, but he did such a great job. So I think he really is going to do this character justice. I am very, very excited. Like I said, the king of adaptations. So I think he is going to be fantastic as Billy Dunn. I'm very, very excited. And I'm also excited to see the chemistry between him and Daisy. That's going to be a very interesting dynamic as well. Next up, this one's very interesting to me. Next up, we have Camilla Dunn, played by Camilla Morone. That name sounded so familiar to me. I was like, who is that? I looked it up. It's Leonardo DiCaprio's most recent ex-girlfriend. When she turned 25, he broke up with her. That's where all of like those jokes came from, and people started like connecting the dots. Oh, he's never dated anyone over 25. But what surprised me the most about this, I didn't know that she was an actor. I thought she was a model. And it also surprised me when I was thinking about her age and thinking about Camilla Dunn, the character. She seemed a little young to me. I'm very interested to see, by the way, how they do the characters in this, because it does follow them over kind of a long period of time, and then it's being told from their older selves' perspective. So are they going to have somebody older playing them? I don't really know. But I'm very excited to see what Camilla Morone brings to this. I'm excited to see her act. I think it's going to be very new and very exciting, and, you know, I hope she does a great job. I'm excited to see her chemistry with Sam Clafen as Billy Dunn and with Daisy as well. I'm excited to see how that whole dynamic works out in the show as well. I'm very, very excited for it. Now, the last person that caught my eye, everyone else that's on the list is kind of not unknown, but I don't really remember seeing them in anything except for Timothy Oliphant. He's playing the manager of the band. I'm excited to see that. He wasn't who I pictured either, but I think he's a great actor and he's going to do a great job. But the last person that really caught my eye was the person playing Karen, and that is Suki Waterhouse. I don't really know much about her. I didn't know she was an actress either, but Karen is one of my favorite characters in the book. She has such a unique perspective on life, and she really knows herself better than pretty much anybody in the book. And the kind of side story of her and Graham is very interesting, and I think that that's just as interesting as the main plot of the book. So I'm excited to see what she brings to that character. I'm excited to see her act. I've never seen it before. And I think that, you know, the entire band as a whole needs to have a really good chemistry with each other. And I trust the casting process of it, not only because it's, you know, Reese Witherspoon's company. She does a great job, but also because a lot of the people that are in this show are not really super, super famous names. Even Riley Keough is not that famous of a name. She's never like been in anything like super huge. There's no like big name stars in this. So I think casting all of these people who are relatively unknown is a smart move, and I don't think we see it a lot anymore. I think it's going to be very interesting to see. I'm hoping that they just cast really good actors who all have really good chemistry with each other. I think that is going to be so important to this story, because it's not just about Daisy. It's about all of them and how they all feel, and they all have their own unique perspectives that are so well represented in this book that I'm hoping it's just as well represented in the show as well. I'm a little nervous about it because, you know, sometimes, a lot of the times, the book is better It's just plain and simple better than the miniseries or movie adaptation. I think most books should be made into miniseries anyway, so I'm glad that they decided to make that move. But I still think that the book is going to be better than this series. I just hope that they do this world justice. And I think it's going to be a good kickoff to when they eventually do something with the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I'm very interested to see if Mick Riva is going to be in this. Mick Riva is basically in every single book. Don't know if he's in Carrie Soto is Back. Haven't read it. But he is in every... I hope they keep the casting consistent. I hope he's in the miniseries. And I hope he's in Seven Husbands, and I hope he's in Malibu Rising whenever they make those adaptations. Hopefully those will both be miniseries as well, but I'm pretty sure Seven Husbands is going to be a movie, which is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what they do with Daisy Jones and the Six, bottom line. Something else that I will mention about this book is that it is pretty easy to read. Most of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books are pretty easy to read. I finished it in maybe 2 days total because I read like the first 40 pages, took a break, then finished the rest of it all in one sitting. They're very easy to read. The font is pretty normal sized, I'd say 1.5 spacing, and you can really get through it pretty fast. And I love this book as well because it doesn't have chapter names. It has like parts of the book that are named. So like The Rise of the Six, like the album, the It Girl, like those are different like parts of the book, but they're not necessarily chapters. And then the chapters don't have names. They just have like a blank space at the top to signal that it is the beginning of a new chapter, but also like it really does just continue. It's a very continuous book, and you can kind of stop at any time, pick it back up, and be okay. You know, you're not going to get lost in this book, get lost in this story. You'll get lost in it in a good way, like you're going to be like transported into the world and whatever, all the good stuff. But you're not going to get lost in the sense that if you put it down one night, pick it up the next, you're going to be totally fine. Don't even worry about it. But yeah, I highly, highly recommend this book. I think it is fantastic. Best Taylor Jenkins Reid book I've read yet. I'm excited to see the adaptation. I think that this book is so unique in the way that it's told through like an interview format. I just love it. I really, really do. And I can't recommend it enough. Especially if you're somebody who loves like the 70s, like music, or if you love pop culture, you would love this too, because it kind of gets into like the drama of their lives as well. I really loved that about it. But yeah, I highly, highly recommend this book, and I definitely think that you should go out and read it. So that basically concludes this episode here today of Reading and Weeping. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I also hope that you have a happy new year. I hope that this new year brings lots of great things. My episode next week is going to be very exciting, talking about like New Year's resolutions and stuff like that. That's a little hint, a little taste of what you're going to see next week. But yeah, I'm also hoping this year to do a lot of different reviews when it comes to adaptations of certain things. I've ordered a few books that have turned into TV shows that I am excited to read and review the both of them and see how they compare, because I love TV. I love to binge watch a good show for sure. And yeah, I'm just really, really excited for everything that is to come. I would really like to thank everybody for sticking around as long as you did. If you got to the end of this episode, I am so grateful, and I hope it entertained you in some way. And if you've listened to the past few episodes and you continue to listen, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have you listening. And I hope that I am inspiring you to read. I'm going to continue to do spoiler-free reviews as much as I possibly can without spoiling anything accidentally. I'm going to continue doing that, but I am hoping that I'm inspiring you to read. I am going to close out this episode with a quote by C.S. Lewis that I read in my last episode. I'm just going to continue reading this quote at the end of all of my episodes because it encapsulates my philosophy on reading quite perfectly. The quote is, "No book is really worth reading at the age of 10, which is not equally and often far more worth reading at the age of 50 and beyond." Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye, guys.